Hey there, welcome to the CMMC Compliance Guide podcast. I'm Stacey.
And I'm Brooke.
From Justice IT Consulting, where we help businesses like yours navigate CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. We're hired guns getting companies fast-tracked to compliance, but today we're here to give you all the secrets for free, so if you want to tackle it yourself, you're equipped to do so. Let's dive into today's episode and keep your business on track. Today we're talking about something that almost every defense contractor experiences at some point in their CMMC journey. It is the moment they realize that it's way bigger than they thought. So in today's episode, we're going to walk through the exact moments where contractors have that wake-up call and what you should expect so that you are not caught off guard. All right, Brooke, let's start with the first major moment contractors realize that it's more complex than they expected. What usually happens during that initial gap assessment?
Well, normally during that initial gap assessment, we at least we find when we go in and do gaps assessments, we start asking them questions, looking at their systems, and trying to figure everything out, and they kind of start getting a worried look on their face, realizing that things aren't in quite as good a shape as I thought they might be. And you present them with what you find and all that, and tell them where you think the gaps are, where it looks like they are, and it's usually a big shock to them. Some more than others. Some know they're just now getting started and they're expecting a minus 203 or whatever it is, and but some of them think that they've done a pretty good job getting ready, and but they're just not real sure, and they want to have somebody come in and check, and they when the lights shine on it and they see where they're really at, it shocks them. A lot of times, we're talking, it can be, they think they might have close to 110, and I think most of the time we usually end up finding that they've got quite a few controls that they're missing, and some of it's because of documentation. They didn't have the documentation right, and there's a lot of controls that you put something technical in place and you're like, we're good, Well, no, you're not, because you got to have the associated documentation to go along with it. So it ends up 40, 50, 60 or more controls that need to be addressed after we come in and look at it. So it's just a big shock to a lot of people.
Another big moment we hear about is when companies start mapping out where their data actually lives. What really happens there?
Well, a lot of times you have an IT guy or maybe the president or the GM, or depending on the size company, it could be, different role types. But you have one person that kind of, hey, this is how things work. I've got everything up here. I know how everything works, and so they kind of line it out, and then you go in and you make sure that you have the key players in the room, and you start asking questions, and where do you get it from? Where do you get CUI from? Well, where does it go? Well, what about these systems? Well, what about this? Well, what about that? And suddenly you find out that your CUI data flow diagram looks like a bowl of spaghetti, and there's a lot of touch points, and sometimes when we get finished with that, generally what we do is we on one of the first phone calls or one of the first web meetings, whatever you want to call it anyway, we start drawing that just simple little boxes and stuff in Visio, because I'm an old Visio guy. We start drawing it out, and sometimes I run out of space on the paper on the page, because there's so many things there, and we're having to shuffle things around to make sense, and then they realize that, I think we need to tighten this up a little bit, and so yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, and generally, when one person was in charge of trying to figure out where all the data is, if they even bothered with that, but when one person is in charge, it usually ends up being quite a bit more than they realize.
So a lot of companies end up thinking that documentation will be the easy part. What does that assumption break down?
Not so much. So documentation, when we first got into this back in the 2017, 18, you're creating your policies, you have some logs, you put some controls in place, and get your poem ready, and you're good to go. And of course you have to work through that poem and everything, but there's a ton of documentation that's needed, and generally your SSP these days, you generally want to break it down per assessment objective, because that's how the assessors are going to ask the questions, is per assessment objective. So it could be one assessment objective, or it could be 6 or 10 or whatever assessment objectives. But you want to break it down by that. For your SSP, you write how you're doing things with what tools and all that kind of fun stuff. And so that assessment objective, that system security plan, your SSP, I can end up easily being 300 pages. I hear of some people that have like 900-page SSPs. But you got to put enough detail in there that it covers everything. You don't want to stay away from putting all your policy language and all your procedural language in there. At least I think you want to stay away from that. You want to refer to those, give some key details about how it works, and then refer to those policies. But so anyway, your SSP by itself is 350, 400 pages. I don't know, something like that, with everything that goes into it, all the statements and descriptions and everything else. Then you have all your policies. Then you're going to have some plans and some procedures that you have to put in there. And that's all the documentation that's associated with the SSP. Then you're going to have, when you get ready for the assessors, you're going to have all your evidence and all your artifacts that you have to upload. Here's my logs my visitor logs. Here's screenshots of the Entra ID users, or the Active Directory users, or the SysPro users, or whatever it may be. Here's all of this, that we've had to attach to all these controls. And then that, you probably, when you get done with all that, and you're ready for an assessment to come, to start, next week or tomorrow or whatever it is, you probably have 400, 500, 600 pieces of evidence, with all the policies and everything else. You probably have 400, 500, 600 pieces of evidence there, for the assessors. And so there's a lot of documentation. And you've got to make sure that you have that. And people just don't realize, if it says defined, that probably if an assessment objective says something is defined, that generally means it's in a policy, right? If it says identified, it may be a list, and so on and so forth. But that it spells out and tells you where you have to document things, and it's a lot.
So another big misconception is that CMMC is just for your IT team.
Oh yeah, not at all.
Right.
This is a business thing. Your IT team will absolutely be a strong part of it. Will be a necessary and important part of it. But your IT team shouldn't be the ones that put the whole thing together for you. That said, depending on how you structure things, they can be a very key part of it, right? But the business decision makers and all the different key departments, key roles or key players, whatever, need to have a hand in it and need to be part of it, because this is business process. This is how you secure your business, right? It's not just some cybersecurity tools. It's how you hire people. It's your drug screening, or well, actually maybe not your drug screening, but your background screening process. How do things go when you hire somebody or terminate somebody, and how do you keep track of their keys? Who has access to the server room, who has access to the front door, and how they have access, and all those kinds of fun things that are not necessarily an IT person's realm. We may I say we because I'm an IT person, but we may know about these things, but those aren't a lot of those are not under our specific control. So this is a business thing. It is not an IT thing.
You briefly mentioned cybersecurity tools in regards to CMMC compliance. A lot of companies end up thinking that they just need to heavily rely on tools early on. What is an issue with that approach?
I mean, you do have to have tools to help you out, but from the word tools, it's a tool to help do something. A hammer is not necessarily going to help you drive a car. Or I should say maybe, a crescent wrench is not going to help you drive a car. Maybe if you don't have a steering wheel, you have some vice grips. Clamp them to the nut on the steering where the steering wheel would be. I guess you could use that, but I digress. Point is, you don't drive the car with a crescent wrench, but you may use the crescent wrench on the car to perform a job, right? I know that may be a terrible example, but I can just hear the people complaining about that right now. But tools are just that. They're tools. Some people want to go all in with an enclave solution. We talk about that all the time here on this podcast, and it's great to try to use an enclave, but you got to realize really what you're talking about. If you're talking about an enclave that's everything's contained in this box and we inherit 80% of the controls from them, that's great. But do you really? Do your data flow diagram. Figure out where everything goes. Does anything come out of that enclave and go to something else? If it does, you just pierce that enclave, and now you have other things in scope, right? So that's typically the way it works with an enclave, unless you're a cloud-only shop. And we deal with manufacturers a lot, and we deal with construction companies a lot. And I can guarantee you, there's not very many of those that are, can survive in a little enclave, because they have to get that information out somehow to do their job, right? But you absolutely need tools. We have to find the best tool for the job that fits, not just price-wise, not just function-wise, but there's all sorts of other things that you have to figure in on those tools, and you don't want tools to overlap, all that kind of fun stuff. But when tools are a secondary concern, they really are. So you figure out what you're doing and what you need to secure, and then you go into how you need to secure it, and then you look at what tools might fit that job, right? So that's where a tool conversation can come in. A lot of people, I can't tell you the number of people that we come to a gaps analysis and they've already bought Microsoft GCC High, Microsoft 365 GCC High. That's great, but you may not need that. You've got a server on site and you don't really do anything in the cloud. That didn't really get you that far down the road. They might buy, one of the other cloud sharing tools. They might buy, Apricorn drives or something like that. But those tools should be the secondary or tertiary or something like that conversation, not the primary conversation. You need to figure out what you need to secure and what you're doing first.
Something a lot of companies tend to misinterpret is the CMMC timelines and how quick that goes by. Can you go into how long this actually takes to accomplish?
Sure, and we're talking about the timeline to go through and be compliant, right? So that's really what we're talking about. It takes time. It just takes a lot of time to go through and understand all of the controls, all the assessment objectives, what they're really asking, how you can implement them in your business, and all that. From the previous question about tools, it'd be great if you could just throw a tool in, write a little bit of documentation, you'd be good to go. You could be compliant in 30 days. It's normally, depending on where you're starting at, it's normally 6 to 12 months, or so before you can be compliant and be ready for that certification assessment. However, if you're starting from zero, It could be 18 months. And this is if you're making decisions, spending money and getting going, and not dilly-dallying. So it just takes time to get all this in place. It takes time to write the policies, write the procedures, or update them, or whatever. It takes time to write your SSP. We talked about the documentation, how much documentation there was. It just takes time. It doesn't matter what kind of great, wonderful templates that you start out with. You've got to customize it to your business and how you're working, and you've got to fill that SSP out, customized for your business. That is not a template. You can't. Well, it can start out as a template, but you've got to customize it for your business, and that is 320 assessment objectives that you have to customize for your business, So that'll take some time. It takes time to link all this together. I can tell you, whenever you go to get your certification or mock assessment, they're going to want to see your all your SSP, your policies, your plans, procedures, all your artifacts, and everything's going to have to be mapped correctly. And so you've either got to use a GRC tool to help you do that, or frustratingly enough, even if you can export out of your GRC tool and have it in a nice structured format with some mapping and all that kind of fun stuff, a lot of them want to see it in their own folder structure. So you got to take it out of the folder structure that the GRC tool is using and put it in the C3PAO's own folder structure. So you got to know how to do that. You got to know what goes where. And that's hours worth of work right there, which I can understand saying it's hours worth of work. I can understand why, the C3PAO might want it in their own format so they can be much more standard about how they do things. I get it. It's just frustrating. So, but that is hours worth of work trying to get all the documents in the right places. Get, if you have, for instance, one copy of a screenshot that applies to several different assessment objectives. Now you got to put that in different places, and there's a lot of this that is time consuming, and so that's just an example. I'm not complaining, or I guess I am complaining, but I'm not. It's not really about that. It's really just an example of that's an example of the time it takes to do something that should be simple. Right. Mm-hmm. So it takes time to write your SSP, it takes time to write your policies, it takes time to implement these things, change your process. You decide one of the things you need to do is put an electronic access control in place for your key cards for your employees. And sure, that's great, but you got to go through the process of bidding it out, make sure it's built properly, installed properly, make sure now after it's done that it's documented properly. That doesn't happen overnight. It all takes some time.
Yeah, like most things in life, typically rushing it is going to get you a pretty bad job. So I would say
absolutely
the same thing applies with CMMC. You have to be very meticulous and prepared in what you need to present forward to those C3PAOs.
Absolutely. And again, that documentation piece is what's critical. You want to, like the access control system I just used it as an example. You want to make sure that what you said needed to be put in place, what you agreed on, and what was put in place is all correct, and then make sure that is reflected in documentation that you have.
So one thing that I feel like doesn't really get talked enough is the legal side of CMMC compliance. So when do companies realize that this is not just a compliance issue?
Well, generally, I guess one of the wake-up calls is when they have to attest and sign a blood oath, basically, that their score in SPRS is what they really have, right? Because they're held legally responsible for that. If you pay any attention at all to any of the CMMC news, it doesn't show up on any of the major news cycles or anything like that. But if you pay any attention to any of the CMMC news, then you'll see some of these companies and institutions that have been caught in the False Claims Act, and you don't want to be caught in the False Claims Act. I want to stay way away from that. It's one thing to have a simple misunderstanding of the way something should be implemented, or the way that you think it was. Anyway, the way you think it should be implemented and the way the assessor thinks it should be implemented, that's one thing. But saying you're doing something and not actually doing it, or just not understanding that, define means, document. You should have a policy, that those are bad things to happen, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of a False Claims Act.
So, Brooke, if you had to summarize all of this, what is the biggest takeaway for contractors listening right now?
CMMC is not a quick, easy thing to get done. And even when you think, oh, no, it's not a quick, easy thing to get done, it's even a lot more complicated than that. So you really need to have somebody on board that knows what they're doing, that hopefully has been through, some sort of training, mock assessments, certification assessments, whatever it may be. Somebody who's been through that and understands what assessors are looking for. An understanding of how long it takes to actually get the documentation done. If your November 10th of this year is coming up quick, and that's when, you can argue about what exactly this means, but that's when CMMC certifications are going to be required on contracts. The Department of War did give themselves a little bit of wiggle room. They can say in a couple of different ways, but one of the ways is they can say, this contract coming out, certification is not required for award of the contract, but it'll be required in option year 1, because there's generally the way they work is they're a 5-year contract, and so they have a 1-year commitment and then 4 option years after that. So they may say on this contract it's not required in year 1, but or the a front year that you sign up with, but option year 1, that first option year, it will the certification will apply then, giving you some time and a definite timeline when you'll have to do that. So don't wait. That's coming up fast, and this is June right now when we're recording this. So this is June, July, August, September, October, November, 6 months away. So, and at this point, right about 6 months away, I guess. So, but don't wait. This stuff takes quite a while to get in place, quite a while to do. I know that there's companies out there that say, we can get you certified. We can get you ready for assessment in 30 days or 60 days or, whatever. They may very well do it, but be very leery and do your homework really well before you go down that road, because I don't want to say snake oil, but there are some things that they may cover and just and may not cover that you need to be covered, right? So those are generally enclave solutions, but point is, there's a lot more to this than just spitting out some policies and throwing a tool in place and getting going. There's quite a bit to it. So you want to hire somebody that really knows what they're doing. Somebody's been trained. Somebody's been around the block with it.
So we're going to move on to one of our favorite segments of the show, which is listener questions.
Absolutely.
We got a listener question on episode 39 that goes over CMMC level 1, and they asked, are out-of-date operating systems able to be compliant, or would all old Windows 10 PCs have to have Windows 11 on them?
And this was a CMMC level 1 question, is that right?
It sure was.
Okay. Well, it doesn't really matter. Either way, they'll have to be updated, because there's a little less language, or there's a good bit less language as far as what you have to do for risk assessments and all that kind of fun stuff. But level 1, you still have to do flaw remediation, and you have to do that. And that one of the flaws, Windows 10, there's no more patches coming out for them unless you've gotten the extended SKU. I don't remember what it's called, but anyway, the extended version of Windows 10, which I can tell you is from what I've heard, we've stayed way away from it, and you got to upgrade to 11, right? But it's not been an easy path and not been a sure path to get those patches applied. It's been kind of messy. So, but you do have to have a way to install patches for everything, not just Windows, but firewall, anything that's in scope. I mean, I can list off a lot of things, but it depends on what's in scope, really. So you have to have a way to remediate flaws, install patches, stuff like that. So, Windows 10 needs to be upgraded to Windows 11. Technically, I guess you could, I don't even know if it's still available, but you could buy the extended version of Windows 10 and be able to say, yes, we have that and we can install patches, but that is it's not going to last forever. And from all the noise that I've heard is that it doesn't work very well. So an assessor might ask you to prove that you're on the latest patch. And so if it's been having problems and you can't prove that, or whatever, anyway, that's an issue, right? And I guess actually you're not going to get an assessor for level 1. So there's that. But you do have to self-attest. Mm-hmm. And, even for level 1, there's probably less of a worry about false claims for level 1. But even for level 1, I would still want to make sure that I'm up and up and got everything covered like I'm supposed to have them covered. So yes, Windows 10, I would say, with those caveats, but I would say yes, Windows 10 does need to be upgraded to Windows 11 so you can get current patches, along with anything else that might be in scope, like your firewall or network equipment, whatever it may be.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for that, Brooke. If you have questions about what we covered, reach out to us. We're here to help fast-track your compliance journey. Text, email, or call in your questions and we'll answer them for free here on the podcast. You can find our contact info at cmmccomplianceguide.com. Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, stay compliant, stay secure, and make sure to subscribe.